Hi, folks. Thanks for watching my monologue. As America starts to reopen, just remember that guns, etc., never closed. They still have over 10,200 square feet of ammo, firearms, and accessories, including safes, and they remain open for business. Stop by their huge store in Mesa or just click on gunsetcetera.com. And if you like my monologues, please subscribe to 960 The Patriots YouTube channel. Thanks. Welcome back and happy May 26th. The brief trip down memory lane when there were a handful of rogue and low-level military personnel acting against orders, without authority, and on their own in Iraq at Abu Ghraib prison. The New York Times ran 47 front-page stories on Abu Ghraib, including 32 days in a row. And those soldiers were court-martialed and went to prison, all quite swiftly. Their actions came nowhere close to reaching any part of the administration at the time, the Bush administration. Is there anything like that kind of coverage in the mainstream press on issues about the abuse of rights of Americans? Issues that not only land in, but originated in Washington, D.C., within the precincts of the administration? Now think just a moment about that which Barack Obama and Joe Biden say was the thing they were most proud of from their 8 years in office. They will say, and the press will agree, that they were scandal-free. Scandal-free. A major terrorist action cover-up, the seizure of reporters' records, and the use of the IRS to investigate conservative organizations. You have a toxic confluence of corruption, political cover-up, and illegal behavior that might be described this way, quote, "We have a cancer within, close to the presidency, that's growing. It's growing daily. It's compounding. It grows geometrically now because it compounds itself," close quote. That's what John Dean said once upon a time about players in the White House that were less important than the Secretary of State, and the Commissioner of the IRS, and the Attorney General. Well, perhaps you have the Attorney General in both cases, but nonetheless. Now we can add what we call Obamagate, but I don't care what you call it. It was the surveilling and leaking to the media of selected information about the incoming administration's national security apparatus, and of course, the coerced FBI interviews and subsequent guilty pleas after an entrapment operation. This, of course, on the tail of an effort by the Clinton campaign to use a faulty report to seek foreign intelligence surveillance activities that would also surveil Americans, but not just any Americans. Americans who opposed the Democratic Party candidate for president. Now, quick, tell me, does anyone remember why burglars tried to place wiretaps in the Watergate Hotel, thus giving us the suffix "gate" to nearly every scandal in Washington since 1972? It was because the Watergate Hotel and office quarter, where the headquarters of the Democratic National Committee were the headquarters of the Democratic National Committee, the opposition party headquarters to the leadership in the White House in 1972, going into an election year. So tell me, what is the difference between breaking into opposing party headquarters and inventing and planting false stories and surveilling under false pretense national security warrants the opposing party challenging you for the presidency? Well, there are two immediate differences. In the first case, in the 1970s, the violators were Republicans. In the second, over the past 4 years, the targets and victims were Republicans. That's difference number one. Difference number two is that the media sided with the Democrats and their sensibilities in the 1970s, and they now side with the Democrats even more. You have to have both shoes drop here to understand the difference, and the fraud of Obama and Biden speaking of their ethics. You have to have both Republican violators and a Democratic press and Republican victims and an even more Democratic Party-affiliated press to understand the whole picture. Now, when you do understand that, you understand a few other things, too. You understand why there was 20 times more reporting in the New York Times on how some low-level and no-named rogue Americans abused Iraqis than there is about high-level Democratic Party office holders and operators abusing the civil rights and liberties of Americans in the nation's capital. You also have to understand that Tara Reade gets less attention than Christine Blasey Ford for these same reasons. And you have to understand something else, too. You have to understand that without a president and attorney general on our side who understands these things in and of themselves, nothing will ever be done about it. And even then, it's a pretty big struggle. It's a big struggle because the judicial system has made it so partisan. Again, I give you Christine Blasey Ford. Why was she important for the left? Not because she had a story of abuse to tell, but because she was the only possible stumbling block to putting a conservative on the Supreme Court. And not a fire-breathing conservative, by the way, but someone no more conservative than is, say, Stephen Breyer, liberal. So for years, you've heard me speak of one rule for the Greeks and one for the Romans here in America. You've heard me lament that the etched words into the front of the Supreme Court, equal justice under law, just are not true. This is why it is so much harder for Republicans to prevail. We do have an arm tied behind our back while Democrats don't, but they also have one other advantage, the media, or at least an old media. That still moves a lot of common opinion, or when it's not moving it, solidifying it. Try it this way. You would, in a great many quarters, hear it said about someone that if they read the New York Times and Washington Post every day and also maybe tuned into CNN for about an hour a day, that person would be a very well-informed person, highly informed. But you and I know they are very well misinformed, highly misinformed. I know that to be true. What I do not know the answer to is if people understand that. Those who think they are well-informed by staying with the New York Times and Washington Post and CNN, I don't know if they think they are receiving only part of the story, and a highly biased one at that. What I also don't know, and this may be worse, is whether they do know it or not and don't care. In other words, do they think truth less important than ideology or bias? Do you realize what a big question this is? It's big because some would answer that ideology is more important than truth. Certainly, that is why there are and were gulags and re-education camps and state censorship in Soviet and Marxist and other fascist and communist regimes. Ideology trumped truth. But then it's an even grander question when you think about it this way. How can you even have an ideology if you don't have truth and fact? This is why here and there and occasionally you get ideological conversions or conversion stories. Eyes are opened to another reality. But in an age where, quote unquote, my truth is more important than the truth, you soon realize ideology is independent of the truth because truth isn't necessary. Right thinking, ideology, that's more important. Consequences be damned. Just as the ideology that brought you the homeless and drug and mental health scandals that plagued so many once great cities damns so many people to their misery. Consequences be damned. On it can go, these ideologies, even with greater and greater body counts visible to all in the streets. You ask, how can it be so hard and so biased in this country? It's not a surprise once you realize the foregoing and how truth cowers before ideology, and ideology can never change without truth. And how for so many, truth just doesn't matter. But ideology does. That's why you can go through charades like the Blasey Ford Kavanaugh hearings, just as you can go through the Russia collusion hoax. But what we have to grasp is that the news and research we distill and promote, take your pick, Powerline, the Federalist blogs, talk radio, it's no less true what we say and should come to the rest of the country as no less credible what we say as what is said in the New York Times or the Washington Post. Indeed, maybe it should be seen as more credible. You hear our experts and sources. You read the sourcing from sites like Powerline and the Federalist or what other favorites you have are, and they simply are very well sourced. In fact, I would argue they're better sourced than the Times and Post because rarely do they use confidential or secretive sources, informed sources, that they won't tell you the names of. And they're not just more true, our side, they're more honest because they don't confuse the public with editorializing and fact in their reporting. They tell you, we tell you, we are conservative. And then we invite you to check our sources or even debate. So while we may know that I am still while we may know that I am still haunted by something, the question is, does it matter? Does truth matter against ideology? Which gets me to this important op-ed in the Wall Street Journal today by Von Gordon Sauter. He was twice the president of the CBS News organization. He writes today of all the partisan and bias in the media that we know about, agreeing with what you or I would typically diagnose. And then he concludes it this way, quote, "Journalism affects social cohesion. Convinced of its role and its legitimacy, however, the media don't seem to much care. But America won't reunite until far more people believe what they see in a news story in print or on screen." Close quote. It's haunting to put it that way because of the unanswered question I post above. Does the vast swath of the left in America actually care whether the news is true, believable, or not? I think they do not. If you want to test, ask yourself why, when you debate an issue with a leftist and make a point that does not comport with their ideology or that actually conflicts with something they said, why do they shift the topic, if not the premise? And not caring about the truth, that, I submit, is a very dangerous thing because we know the cost of lies. I'm Seth Leibsohn. We'll be right back.